Hi, guys. Welcome to week 4 of Philosophy and Christian Thought. I'm here in the sanctuary of the church where I serve as associate pastor. A couple of quick housekeeping things before we get into this week's talk. First, I hope your epistemology essay went well last week. I'll be grading those soon. And your next essay is on metaphysics, so check in the writing resources file under the doc sharing tab for the list of suggested questions. I think it's really a good idea to use one of those questions. And just like last week, email me your thesis question, your thesis statement, and then your 3 supporting arguments, and this will help me make sure you're on the right track with your essay. Because remember, if you don't get your thesis right, you can't get the essay right. Okay, so when in your life did you feel the most free to determine your future? When did you feel like your choices would really have a huge impact on the direction of your life? For me, the time that felt the most wide open was the summer between high school and college. I was choosing a major that would determine my career, and I could even choose to change colleges if I want to. It just felt like the whole world was open to me, and the choices that I made in those few months would have a radical impact on the direction of my life. So this week, we're talking about freedom and how much choice we really have in our world and even in our worldview. So this whole debate is called free will versus determinism. Here in America, we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. But how free are we really? I mean, I may want to be a professional soccer player or NFL star, crushing quarterbacks and making sacks, but I don't think I actually have the physical freedom to do that. I may have the political freedom, but this body isn't going to run that fast. We also have some social limitations. Scientists talk a lot about generational poverty. When you grow up and the ceiling is this high and the social expectations have a particular shape, that determines a lot of the choices you make in life. And even advertising really shapes us in subtle but powerful ways. Think about how advertising shapes our perception of beauty, for example. We may not actually be free to decide what a beautiful person is, or at least what we think a beautiful person is. We also have personal limitations that may not be so free for us. What we like and dislike. My sister absolutely hates mushrooms. I'm not sure she's free to like them. And addictions can cause issues for us too. I mean, the essence of addiction is not being free to choose whether or not you do something or not. And then, of course, our freedom can be limited by abuse from others, situations like human trafficking and crimes against other people. So freedom necessarily has some limits that just logically have to happen. So as we think about this and work through all of this, we've got 4 basic, my numbers are wrong, we've got 5 basic theories of freedom and how this works together. The first basic theory is free will. This is the one we're probably most familiar with. Free will, the theory of free will just says we have at least some genuine freedom to determine our choices and the outcome of our lives. I may not be physically free. I may not have the physical body to be an NFL linebacker, but I do have the freedom to exercise and work hard and try. I do have the freedom to play football whenever I can get enough people together to play. Next basic theory is determinism. This is saying that we don't really have any freedom. We cannot help but to will and to act the way that we do. We're just like we're one domino in a long chain of dominoes that's falling, and we don't have any choice in the whole discussion. Then there's fatalism, which is similar to determinism, but a little bit different. Fatalism says we cannot control the broad outcomes of our lives. We have a certain fate. and we may resist our fate, but our fate will eventually catch up with us. If you remember the story of Oedipus Rex, the Greek myth, that was a story of fatalism. He had this terrible fate that someone predicted, and he ran away from it, but through a long chain of events, he ended up having the terrible fate predicted happen anyway. Now, the difference between fatalism and determinism is fatalism is not cause and effect. It's not the chain of dominoes. We have some flexibility and freedom, but eventually our fate will happen to us whether we like it or not. The fourth major theory is indeterminism, or you might call it randomness. And this is saying that reality is fundamentally random or unpredictable. There's nobody calling the shots anywhere. It just kind of happens. It's a one chemical reaction after another. And then the last is compatibilism. Yeah, that's a hard word. You know compatible and compatibility. Well, this is compatibilism, that free will and determinism are compatible. They can coexist together. And actually, in practice, a lot of Christians take this compatibilist view, that God controls things, but people still have choices. We'll talk about that, actually, right now. So when we break down free will and think about it theologically, there are three major players who we have to bring into the discussion. First is John Calvin. He came just a little bit after Martin Luther. He was one of the great reformers. He was a pastor in Switzerland in the 1500s. And Calvin believed in determinism. He said, look, people, nobody deserves to be saved. We all deserve to go to hell. But God chooses who will be saved. These are the elect. And it doesn't have anything to do with human choice. God chooses. Because if it had to do with human choice, then we would deserve something for choosing the right choice. But if you're chosen, if God chooses you, you're going to be saved no matter what you do. You can't change it. You can't stop it. Nothing changes it. And so then predestination is God's choice of who goes to heaven or who goes to hell. Next major player is Jacob Arminius. He was a Christian pastor in the Netherlands in the 1500s and 1600s. He had a problem with Calvin's unconditional election. He said, okay, God foreknows, God knows in advance who is going to accept his grace, but God doesn't actually cause humans to accept grace. He knows it ahead of time, but he doesn't cause it. So then what the Bible talks about as predestination is just an expression of God's divine foreknowledge, the fact that God knows everything ahead of time. Knowing it doesn't mean he caused it. Then John Wesley, about 150 years later, a pastor in England, he built on this. So he said, look, think about it like this. Here's time, past, present, future. God is outside of time. God is some other place up here where he can look down on the past, the present, and the future, and it's all present tense for him because God is bigger than time. And so God chooses everybody for salvation. God chooses every human who's ever lived to go to heaven and gives everyone a real choice. But some people reject that choice. God knows who's going to reject that because God's in this superposition up here outside of time. But that doesn't mean God caused their choice. He just can see the whole picture all at once. All right. So when we put all of this together and we think about freedom and determinism and free will and how much choice we really have and does everything in life happen for a reason, or is some of it just the result of free will, or is some of it just random accidents? I think that we can come down to a couple of really helpful takeaways. First, we are actually free enough that our choices really matter for our life. Good choices tend to lead to good outcomes. Not always, it's not a guarantee. You can do things right and still get kicked in the teeth. But usually, good, wise choices lead to good, healthy outcomes. Wesley talked about this in terms of breathing in God's grace and breathing out God's grace. When we respond to the grace that God has given us, that opens us up to more grace. So faithful response leads to more grace, and God just keeps giving us grace and helping us along in life. So the first basic takeaway is we're free enough that our choices really matter. And second, life and our world is determined enough that we can trust God with the future. Now, I'm not saying God causes everything. I don't actually believe that. But no matter what happens, God is reliable and trustworthy. No matter what happens, God loves us, and God is working for our good. If the world falls apart on us tomorrow, if hurricanes and earthquakes and violence and all of that kind of stuff comes our way, this one thing is solid and reliable. God loves us. And that really is enough. All right. So dig in. Freedom, free will, determinism, randomness. Think hard this week. But remember, your choices matter, and God loves us.